Welcome to the Talk With Kiet podcast, where we connect people, ideas, and capital to make a difference in the world. Today with me, I am so blessed to have Chris White. Chris is the founder and CEO of two companies, ViableMkts and BondCliQ. Chris is a well-renowned bond market expert and a frequent guest on CNBC. Chris and I today will talk about his entrepreneurial journey and, most importantly, managing mental health through that journey. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Kit, for having me on. It's an honor to be here. And, because this is live, this is a little bit more exciting. We can't edit anything out. So
that's right. That's right.
Unlike
a high wire conversations. But you know what's interesting is, you and I, Chris, every time we talk, I'm like, wow, like you and I can talk endless hours because of our belief system and what we do for a living, but what we see. And one of the things that, if I record this conversation, which is the premise of this podcast, like so many people will benefit from your insight and knowledge and experience. And so, going back to tradition in this podcast, let's start with your journey, Chris. Like, how do you start your entrepreneurship journey, from your Goldman or Barclays or market access day to now deciding, hey, I'm going to start a company?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take you through that. I think that the fact that we're focusing on the mental health side of entrepreneurship, hopefully it'll be helpful to someone. I'm happy to share sort of what some of the challenges have been for me, what's worked, what hasn't worked. But my journey to entrepreneurship, I would say in this particular space, like the fintech space, really started at Market Access, which at the time I was there, it was not a public company. It became a public company shortly after, not due to my efforts. I was really young. I didn't know much about the business, but I loved the atmosphere of working at like an up and coming environment. I had worked in a big bank previous to that. I didn't like that atmosphere. It probably wasn't good timing, the age that I was at, the maturity I was at to be working in that environment. A startup was much better for me. I got a lot more responsibility more quickly. So that really started it. It showed me like I had an interest in that sort of atmosphere. But for market access, I ended up going back to the big banks. I worked for Barclays, I worked for Goldman. And really what led me to entrepreneurship was I had built something at Goldman. I had built a dark pool trading platform, had realized through that process that there was what I thought was a fundamental flaw in corporate bond market structure, that this piece of architecture needed to be built. And then as I researched it on my own, I realized it was, the idea that I had was the most unoriginal idea in the history of financial markets. And that really motivated me to go out and build it, because I said, there's a historical blueprint for what I'm talking about here. And what we do on the BondCliQ side is we're here to organize pricing data in the marketplace and make it public. And the reason why that's important in any market is because to modernize the market, a market must have high quality data that is accessible to a broader range of market participants. Then the market starts to move faster and you get more innovation. But if you don't do that, the trend or the evolution of a market will be compromised. And so that's a big part of what we're trying to attack on the BondCliQ side of what we do.
And so when you had the idea, which is probably on a napkin, on a piece of paper, like how do you go about from the idea to getting started?
Talking with other entrepreneurs is big. Like a big influencer, somebody who I admire a lot, is actually a classmate of mine from high school. It's a guy named Mazi Dar, and I'm sure you know Mazi from OpenFin. But I always say to Mazi, he's, hey man, you're like 3 or 4 years ahead of me, right? Which is great. Like I think, especially the high school we went to, people are really competitive, but I don't mind following behind Mazi Dar. He's a great guy, brilliant. He's built a great company. And he was very helpful in terms of walking me through the thinking. And probably the most helpful thing he said to me was he was quite honest about what it is you're going to make as an entrepreneur in the first few years. And he said, you're going to make about minimum wage. And he was correct about that. Now I have 3 kids. I live in New York City, so making that work, I had to think a little bit differently. And based on what Mozzie told me, I realized I had to launch 2 companies. I had to launch BondCliQ, which is the company around the idea that I had come up with, but also I had to launch a company so that I could earn money through consulting. And that's really the origin of ViableMkts. So I was able to kind of keep the lights on with ViableMkts while pursuing the dream with BondCliQ, making minimum wage.
Yeah. And what was that psychologically, when you're trying to convince others on the idea,
Well, on the BondCliQ idea,
on the BondCliQ idea? Yeah.
yeah, okay. So this is where this is where I would say on the mental health side of things, this is where you have to sort of be prepared, because it's one thing to talk about something, and I'm sure most people have had some idea that they've kicked around. Maybe they talked about it over dinner, maybe they obsessed about it for a couple of weeks. But it's another thing to then formalize that idea and then ask people to invest in it. And having no previous experience with that process, I certainly took my lumps in terms of maybe talking to the wrong people. And sometimes, like, here's an example. You don't talk to a VC that only invests in Series A stage and better about your idea. I didn't realize that at the beginning. So I would talk to any VC and I would, pitch my heart out. And at the end of it, they'd say, hey, interesting idea. We can't invest until you're at Series A stage. And so that happened to me a few times. And then I started to realize, like, there are different sort of capital sources, and you need to make sure that the maturity of your company is matched properly. Because even if you are talking about turning, straw into gold, if you're not at a certain level, a VC just won't touch you because they're not allowed to. So it was difficult in the beginning. I think the other thing you have to do is you got to have that conversation with your family. If you are a family person, you've got to start planning around it. And luckily, my wife was going through something similar where she's like, you know what, I think I'm going to start a company. So we both had an understanding about what was going to change. And really what changed for us is hey, like the way we spend money, our lifestyle,
Yeah.
that's all going to change. And we were both prepared for it.
And I guess, before you start this journey, you were Chris White at Goldman. And then now
Yeah.
you're like this startup guy who is trying to get everyone's attention. Like how did that felt, like that pivot? Because, like, hey, you're the Goldman guy. Now you're like, actually, who are you? Like, do you felt that through the journey?
Oh, absolutely. That is something that becomes very clear to you. If you move from a position where you can do something for people and then you go into a position where you need stuff done for you, your social circle will get much smaller. Your business connections their business network will get a lot smaller. You will realize that there are portions of your network that were literally there because you could do stuff for them. And then when it's time for people to be supportive for you, they're nowhere to be found. And so I can say that, like, I had to come to terms with that, with a lot of those relationships. And that's for an entrepreneur, I think it's positioned in such a way of like, hey, it's this freedom, it's this nirvana of you being your own boss. But there's also, it's a cold winter in some ways around the personal relationships that you have. And so, there are people who I know who, when I was at Goldman would, constantly make themselves available to me because they needed something from me. I was kind of a gatekeeper there.
Yeah.
And then, as I made this move, have acted like I don't exist anymore. So, but they say in situations like that, you'd rather know, right, Kit? I'm sure as
That's
you've
right.
gone, as you've gone from a big position at IHS Market and now you're on your own, you're doing your thing. It's like people have a different reaction to you. And I don't know whether you have any situations in mind, but it's absolutely universal that is going to
No,
occur. You have to figure out.
you're right on, right? Because when you're the gatekeeper and everyone wants to talk to you, it's different. And now you're like, well, I need everyone's help. Oh, saying, well, okay, now you need my help. Okay, even though you were very kind to them and you mentor them or you help them, etc. The second you're not on that seat, right, it's very different. But to your point, the good news is you now know who's who. And sometimes you gotta filter out your network, and it's a great way to filter out what's a true network that you need in life, right?
Well, I do want to make sure that I bring something up here, because I think that there's a part of entrepreneurship that breeds sort of a negative attitude as entrepreneurs become more successful, because it's almost like hey, you didn't help me when I needed help, and so you take on.
That's right.
It's like, hey, you used to kick sand in my face on the beach, and now you made it. So this is what, when you look at things, like if you watch like The Social Network or any movies about entrepreneurship, like now I kind of understand where some of the more well-known entrepreneurs, like they take on sort of the villain persona, because sometimes it's like, hey, you didn't believe in me, but I made it happen, and so I'm forever going to put you in a certain box. But something that I would suggest as you're being an entrepreneur is that you really need to work on your forgiveness, and you also need to try to put yourself in the place of others. In a lot of cases, I think that certain people just didn't know how to be helpful to me. And maybe they're thinking that, oh, the only thing Chris wants from me is for me to invest in his company. And absolutely not. I can say that for all of like my really close personal relationships, the number one thing that I wanted was understanding. Understanding that, like, hey, I'm not present. I can't do the things that I used to do. That doesn't mean that our friendship should necessarily suffer. Just, I need your understanding that, like, yo, hey, Chris is going through it now, and when he can take a breath of air, I'll be here for him. And it won't be like hey, screw you, man, you haven't been talking to me as frequently.
Wait. Did you just defunct the myth? So if I quit my job and I go entrepreneurship, I don't get my time back. I don't get all the free time I want.
No, well, you look, Kit, there are different ways to do it. I was actually, I was teaching yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was telling people that, like, really wealthy people struggle to be entrepreneurs because they're going to be in the ebbs and flows of the process. When you hit a nadir, when it's really dark, if you could walk away, you'd walk away. So that's what happens a lot of times. But if you're not super wealthy, and I'm certainly not one of those people, like, you don't have a choice. You've got to cycle through that. So you're cycling through that sometimes means like a very prolonged, intense period of working. And when you work at a regular job, right?
Yeah.
Hey, when Friday hits, hopefully you have one of those jobs where you can just turn it off, and then you turn it back on Monday when you're back in the office. But certainly one of the challenges mentally as an entrepreneur is it never turns off. And this is something that definitely over the years has impacted my sleep. Very difficult to sleep. Like, if you ever have that situation where you try to go to sleep, but your mind is still cycling. It's almost like a computer that doesn't turn off. It's thinking about
going through that checklist, right? That you got to address.
You're going through that checklist, and this has got to be done. That's going to be done. And it can create sort of an anxiety before you're supposed to be going to sleep. So certainly my sleep patterns, and in really super intense periods of having to get stuff done, my sleep patterns have been so bad that, like, I'll, like, mid conversation, start falling asleep if I haven't had good sleep for a long time. And this is, again, a part of the mental health piece. It's like, how do you get your rest while also executing? But yeah, so just on that side of it, like, there is this thing, like, oh, it's great to be my own boss, but one of the things that you really have to ask yourself is, can you hold yourself accountable? Now, when it comes to the work that I do at BondCliQ, the work that I do at ViableMkts, I can hold myself accountable pretty well, meaning, which, like, I can look myself in the mirror and say, like, you're getting it done or you're not getting it done, and have that be an honest conversation.
Yeah.
When it comes to diet and exercise, Kit, I am not a good boss for myself, because I will rationalize that extra piece of pie or skipping that workout. So it's just, you have your strengths and your weaknesses when it comes to holding yourself accountable. If you're going to do this, you got to make sure that you're going to be the best boss for yourself.
Well, let's touch on that a bit, because that's an important aspect which you touch on, which is health, right? Whether it's sleep, whether it's eat, like, what would be some of your tips, because you've gone through this experience on how to properly, be mindful of that as you're going through this journey?
Well, I can tell you that, the mistakes that I've made is probably, just diet and sleep are just as important as getting your pitch deck together, because it's
Yeah.
going to your long-term energy, your ability to execute are going to be compromised. Your demeanor will be compromised by those things. So that's not really discussed on the sort of in the hustle culture,
Yeah. Yeah.
atmosphere that we have. It's all about push, 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 but
That's right.
you do need to take those breaks. And recently, this summer, actually, for the first time in years, I had a vacation that I would classify as getting deep rest. And deep rest to me is like, not only consistently good sleep, but also not having a huge amount of logistics to deal with every day. And I've got a family. I've got three kids. I've got a wife. So I had a week. We went on a vacation where we stayed at a house where there was a chef, and it was so wonderful to be able to really downshift, and get that deep rest. And I didn't realize how much I needed my batteries to be recharged. The signals, now that I'm aware of it, if you find a lot of things that you used to enjoy they feel like a huge effort, then you probably need to recharge your batteries. And so what was funny is, like, by the end of the vacation, one of the things that I love to do that I hadn't done in a while is design product. By the end of the vacation, I'd done like 2 or 3 product designs, just because I was like, I'm back. Like I'm back to me, right?
Yeah.
And I think what that comes into is there is this, for entrepreneurship, I think it is, a lot of it could be classified as crisis management.
That's right.
And it's a prolonged crisis management. And that crisis management is everything to crisis management around your sleep and your energy, but also crisis management around your personal finances and the finances of the company. Some people do well with that, but a lot of people don't. But everyone, if you're going through prolonged crisis management, it will take a toll on you. It's very
That's right.
fatiguing.
But you raise a good point. That is, being able to catch yourself and really forcing yourself to recharge, because it's like a rubber band, right? You stress too, like it's gonna pop. It's gotta sometimes just go back a little bit for you to keep going, and that's not easy for people when they're going through a survival mode, right?
No, and I overheard my wife saying something, and it really touched me. And I cannot stress enough how much having the right partnership in your life, your spouse, if
Yeah.
but I overheard her and my mom speaking, and she said to my mother, she's like, I'm so happy that I was able to structure something so that Chris could really get rest. And so for me, I had to have a partner that's prioritizing me at times, right? And was like, I'm going to make sure that my husband gets some rest. I see what's going on with him. And because my wife has also become an entrepreneur herself, like, we have that relationship where, when one of us is going through really a lot of stress, a heavy workload where you've got to execute, because if you don't execute, the thing falls apart. We've been able to sort of support each other in different ways along that. And I cannot stress enough how important it is that if you have that person in your life, that you're able to get that sort of support, because there will be times where literally, you need someone to tap you on the shoulder to help you through portions of this.
No, exactly. And actually, you raise a good point, which is, so, when you work for corporate, you can have that dividing line of professional and personal, right? Now you're running a startup, you're a dad of 3, you're a husband of an amazing wife. Like, how do you manage those barriers?
Well, that's the other thing. You become like a cliche. If you're really doing this, it's like you have to lean into the cliche. And what's the cliche? Like, honestly, when you go to like a dinner party or anything like that, and someone asks you what you do, you can't help it, because you what you do embodies everything about you if you're really going to build something. So
Yeah.
you end up kind of being boring in terms of your conversation topics, because what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about the industry that you're in, what you're trying to build, why it's going to be transformational. It's like it's difficult to decouple, those things, and I think in some ways you can become insufferable around that stuff.
Yeah.
But it also it's that level of obsession and commitment is a requirement, I think, especially in the very early stages, because if you're unless you've got like a rich aunt or uncle who's just going to throw money at you, you've got to be able to do a lot with very limited resources. And so you end up, being the marketing person as well as being the CEO, and
Yeah.
being HR, and being the assistant around booking and T&E and all that stuff. You have to take all of those things on. But yeah, that it does sort of, your personality becomes your business, and for some people they don't like that, and I can understand that. I know that's happened to me, where
Yeah.
just talking about transparency in financial markets, that's, if I could talk about that with somebody for 5 hours a day, I would do it. But there are maybe 5 or 6 people in the world that would find that remotely interesting. So that's why
Yeah.
you become a little bit less fun at a party.
So how does that transition work from, uh, dad working at Goldman Sachs and dad running a startup as a dad to 3 kids?
Um, that's a really good question. If you're doing this when you have a family, I think one of the things that you can do that's hopefully a positive for your family, review it as a positive is you set an example around work, right? And so the ages of my children, I've got a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And so with my 14-year-old, we're constantly having conversations around the management of his time and his schedule. And I sort of, when we have those conversations, I continue to point to you, like, you see that sometimes I've got to take the entire weekend and I'm working. I don't work every hour of that weekend, but I'll wake up early and I'll start to do my work, because I'll know that if I don't do that, I won't be ready for Monday. And like trying to coach him through game planning around execution. And what I do find is that younger people, right, they haven't necessarily developed the mental capacity to forecast what effort will take to complete the things that are in front of them. So Kit, like I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but like now that you're you've got a business that you've built, and you've got this podcast, and there's some other things that you're working on, there are all of these sort of tasks that you have to complete. I don't know if you've noticed your ability to estimate the time and then almost imagine the scheduling of when you're going to have to do that work. That is actually like really, really important executive functioning for being an entrepreneur. If you're not really good at that, you're going to struggle, because you're going to have these huge spikes when you've got to deliver stuff, and you're not, and instead of being able to smooth it out because you've planned a little bit better.
No, I think you're right on, right? So for me is, versus thinking Monday to Friday or Saturday, Sunday, is really thinking about in types of activities. And when you break down these types of activities, and also understanding, I have 3 lovely kids, but there are certain times of the day when my kids ignore me. So even if I'm there, like I don't need to be there, right? So it's really about balancing the value of your time and the activities, and understanding, the type of energy it needs from you, and the actual time it needs from you for certain types of activities. And that's helped me tremendously, just making sure I understand that. And it's not about, Monday to Sunday. It's really about every day, and it's about the types of activities.
Yeah, well, I, if if you're going to give yourself the best possible chance of success, but also keep a healthy marriage, and also be there for your children, something's got to give. And the thing that has had to give with me is like I used to love NFL season football. I could sit there on Sunday for the entire day and just watch game after game after game. I love that. I don't watch NFL football anymore. Not at all. I just don't have that time to be able to dedicate an entire day to just my pleasure. And so that can be a big adjustment for folks. I don't have gaps in my schedule that would allow me to do like a leisure trip with my friends, right? Because if I'm doing that, then now I have to sacrifice the family vacation. Like they just all can't be done together is what I've found, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And give
But
yourself the key thing here, and give yourself the best possible chance.
that's right.
Like you could do them all, but the chances that you're going to be successful are going to be lower. There's no question about that. Sorry, you're going to say something.
Yeah. No, I'm saying, but you raise a good point. That is, what it forced you to do is prioritize life in a much deeper way than you ever did. Because a lot of times, you just let what goes next. But now you're like, I don't have a choice. Like I gotta plan this properly, and I gotta, not that I don't care about my friends, but if I have to pick between my family or my friends, family first. If I gotta pick my health or X, so it forces you to prioritize when you think about it.
Yeah, well, with a lot of my personal relationships, some of them gotten very, very strong because I have other friends who have also become entrepreneurs, and where they've gotten strong is like we'll be very, very close, but might not hear from them for 3 weeks, and then when I do hear from them, I'll just be like, "Hey, you okay?" And they'll just be like, "Just going through a rough one," and I inherently understand what they're talking about. If the same thing happens with me, they inherently understand what I'm talking about. And then we can move on to just back to where we were with our friendship. But there will absolutely be situations where people will be, quite frankly, like put off by the fact that you're not as engaged as a friend. And there's nothing wrong with their reaction. It's actually quite natural. So you've got to see it from their shoes. Hey, you're not around anymore. You're not participating. You don't text me back. You don't, all that stuff. And from their perspective, they can feel very deprioritized. And in the moment, as an entrepreneur, like as long as that moment is where you have to get the company established, that's exactly what's going to happen. So how do you handle those things? And I think probably one of the best ways to do it is to communicate, but to also accept that there are some relationships that are just going to be lost to this. And it is the sort of the collateral damage of this sort of journey. And for some people, that can really be challenging mentally.
Yeah. And let's talk about, the relationship with your spouse. Now,
Yeah.
I know your wife is extremely supportive, but I would imagine there would be times of tension as well, given the journey you're going through. Like, how do you manage through that?
Yeah. So, first of all, as with most relationships, as you get older, like money is like a huge cause of friction, but also sharing the responsibilities around children.
Yeah.
So those two things. So, I'd say that what we both were able to do collectively is just lower our expectations around our cash flow, right? Like, hey, let's do the vacation on points, right? And let's not eat out as much. Like that we were able to do together, and so it helped. And also, like as we started to take some major risks in order to pursue entrepreneurship, both being comfortable with taking those risks. But something that I started to realize, and it happened. It was teased out through an argument that happened, and with my spouse, and what had happened was because we share in the childcare duties, there was there was a time where it was my turn to take my youngest to school, but I had a call, so just like we do for each other. My wife stepped in. She's like, "Okay, I'll handle it." Right.
Yeah.
My call got canceled after she had left, and when she came back, I tried to get in a quick workout on the Peloton. Another thing I would suggest that if you can do that, because the time for you to go to the gym. But anyway, So when she comes back, she asked me a question and she said, "Were you telling me the truth about your call being canceled?" And it started a big fight because my reaction to that, Kit, was really like, I was very hurt by that. And so what it started me thinking about was, after I stopped thinking about like, why'd she say that, and being all self-righteous about it, like, I don't lie to you, stuff like that, I started to kind of ask myself a question, like, why did that bother me so much? And as I really examined it, the reason why it bothered me so much is because I feel like for a prolonged period of time, I have not been believed. And I'm constantly reminded by rejections from VCs, rejections on the capital raising process, that people don't believe me in terms of what I'm saying. And so it impacted me very negatively because I felt like my wife was saying she didn't also believe. She was checking to see whether,
Yeah.
hey, were you running a little game on me? It was harmless in in her question, but I took it really hard because, and that's when I realized, I'm like, oh wow, like I've been affected by this. I've been affected by, people talk about, hey, I went through like 200 rejections and still got there. Well, okay, has that changed you at all? And I would say, for anyone who's going through the entrepreneurship journey and knows what I'm talking about in terms of that capital raising process, like really think, has it changed you as a human being, like in terms of the way that you react to other people, your sensitivities to certain stuff? Um, and this is where I think some people can kind of go dark, right? Because you feel like almost like a vengeance building inside you, but that energy is not good. What I tell other entrepreneurs around the capital raising process is just, your goal is to make it expensive for someone to not believe in you.
That's right.
So he's
That's
like,
right. That's right. That's right.
yo, I tried to put you on. I talked to you. I got this done. By the way, if you had actually invested when I talked to you, you'd be quite happy right now. But you know what? You made a very expensive decision not to back me. And that's your revenge. You don't have to go like all, in your face, or get, sort of take the negative side of it. Let your point be somebody saying, "Damn, I missed out,"
That's right.
without having to like proactively shove it in their face, or like, I don't know. That's why I think, like, at the end of the day, I think if you unpack the psychology of like Musk and Bezos taking rockets to the moon and stuff like that, it's like, it's a part of that. It's like,
Yeah.
they're not done. Or if you ever listen to Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame speech, his
That's right.
entire Hall of Fame speech was like taking names of all the people that didn't believe in him. You've got to let that go. You have a finite amount of energy. You don't want to consistently dedicate a portion of it to being upset.
How do you go through mentally, though, getting rejected all the time and still believing in what you do, and say, well, wait, maybe there's something I'm not, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm crazy. Like, how do you balance that in terms of saying, actually, you know what, I know what I'm doing, I just have not found the right people that see eye to eye with me?
Well, what you're bringing up is so important, because I've seen some entrepreneurs be so convicted in what they're doing that they don't listen to anybody.
Yep.
And they're on this like, oh, people just don't see it, and they just continue going forward and it doesn't work, right? And then I've seen some other entrepreneurs that, as they meet some resistance, really question themselves. So you have to have a lot of integrity around your sort of idea development process. Like, I don't want to shit. Like, here's a fraction. Like, before I came up with the idea for BondCliQ, I would read, I probably read like 4,000 or 5,000 pages of documents around market formation, transparency, things like that, so that when I finally formed the idea, it was an unoriginal idea. It was an idea that that had been very, very well researched from every angle. In fact, as I was forming the idea, I was also trying to break it. Like, where does this not make sense? Where does this not work? Blah, 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 blah. So in that way, I had the confidence because I felt like I had put the work in around the idea, right? That's not to say that I had the right approach on the idea or the right angle. I'm still adjusting it, right? So you do have to be coachable. But I would say you have to take instructions from people who are qualified to give it. And a lot of times what you're getting is you're getting instructions from VCs with, in certain cases, with all due respect, don't know what they're talking about. They have a very surface understanding of what you do or the market that you're in, and yet they're going to tell you how they think that you should be doing something. And so you've got to be able to judge where it's coming from. And I would say, like, one of the things I really sought out investors that had experience in what I was trying to do. One of the investors I have ran market data sales at NASDAQ for 10 years. I'm supposed to have a call with him next week. So
Yeah.
you better believe when he tells me, I think you should be doing this or I think you should be doing that, that I'm soaking that in. But on the capital raising process, only weight the feedback based on the experience of the person. And so you can tell, I'll tell you one of the most frustrating things for me, or I let it frustrate me, and I would say, try to let this go, is when I would go into a meeting with a VC and it was clear that they hadn't done any of the preliminary work to understand what we do. And then they'd ask me questions that showed that they were completely, just devoid of knowledge in what I'm talking about. But then they were speaking with such an authority about what they think I should do or where I'm going wrong. That was always really frustrating, Kit, because you want the respect of at least someone doing a little bit of work on their side. However, I try to put myself in other people's shoes. I mean, look, if they're going through 1,000 of these a year, like, there's only a finite amount of time they have to really get educated. But what I would say, and I think that this is legitimate criticism, admit that you don't know what you're talking about sometimes when you're on the side of a potential investor, instead of trying to sort of omit this sort of authority as if you know what's best for something that you slightly understand.
Yeah. But actually, given, and I got to be careful saying this, but it's live, but I'll say it anyways. Like, the VC was like a bull market. Anyone can be a VC. Like, you think that's the issue now? Like there's just too many VCs, and a lot of them, they don't really understand what they're doing.
No, okay. So I had one of my investors give me a wonderful compliment, and because we've pivoted a little bit in terms of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And the investor said, listen, I invested in you. I believe that you'll figure this out. The initial thing that you pitched to me certainly sounded great. You say it needs to be tweaked. I'm investing in you. And this is where I think we move into an area of entrepreneurship and mental health where we must acknowledge how race and gender factor into the process for different entrepreneurs, because ultimately VCs or potential investors, they're investing in that entrepreneur, right? To problem solve the way to making something a legitimate business, right? And so based on your race, your gender, your age, some VCs are not able to see you as being someone that could provide that type of leadership. And this is where I think VCs are making a tremendous mistake, because they cannot check their own initial biases around who they interpret to be leadership and who they interpret to not have those qualities. And they end up not probably missing out on some massive opportunities. The shame of it all is, as we know, like, even the best ideas might need several rounds of raising capital before they come to fruition. And so some people are given, what I say on this is, some people they get in that bat and they get 10 strikes, and some people don't even get to see a pitch. And
Uh,
there's no question
yeah.
in my experience, like what's been challenging on the mental health side is going into a room. I'm the only Black person in the room, and feeling like they don't quite see me. And what I mean by they don't quite see me is I'm talking to you about something where I feel like I've achieved the status of an expert's expert, and I have the receipts to back it up.
That's right. You're on
Right?
CNBC, you're Goldman, like you have an amazing pedigree. Like,
No, but even beyond that, I've got patents where I'm the lead inventor.
yeah.
Right? I teach Columbia Business School. I teach about electronic trading. So, but then I'll go into a room and I feel like I'm not seen. And this is what I mean by not being seen. I have to kind of tell this story. So, former basketball coach or assistant basketball coach when I played at Brown became an entrepreneur, and he ran successfully several companies. He's very, very successful. He's been a CEO many times over. So reconnected with him and was talking to him about the challenges of raising capital. And so he said, you know what, Chris, I'm going to help you, right? Let me look at your materials. Let's work on your deck. Let me hear your pitch. And so we did that together. Then we went together to a pretty big VC that has invested in almost like 200 different companies, right?
Yeah.
Have a meeting with one of the partners. It's a half an hour. Go through the pitch. He's there. Afterwards, he's like, that was incredible. It's amazing. You hit all the points. That was great. The partner at this VC says, hey, I'll discuss this with my partners. We'll get back to you. 5 days later, they come back. Hey, this is just something we don't really understand, so we're going to pass. And so I called, my mentor, and I said, listen, they just passed. I want you to understand something. Because my mentor, he's a white guy. He hadn't experienced before. He's like, I don't understand this, Chris. Like, what? I was there. I saw it. And I said, you have to understand something. My expectation is not that they just hand me a novelty check at the end of my pitch. My expectation is that I am worthy of a deeper dive. I'm worthy of a deeper dive because of my credentials. I'm worthy of a deeper dive because literally what I've produced in this marketplace. I run the industry newsletter on innovation. I've been running that for 8 years, the Friday newsletter.
That's right.
So it's like, so this is where I feel like, hey, I wasn't seen, because I feel like I was owed. I remember saying this to my mentor, I'm owed at least an hour. To be so dismissive so quickly of me, you didn't see me. And
Yeah.
as I've talked to other entrepreneurs, especially as I've talked to Black women, like this is a major issue where there's one friend that I have. She's a PhD. She has this brilliant idea around dealing with bed sores. But when I talk to her, like a lot of what we talk about is she's like, they just don't see me. Like people with no medical background, when I go to pitch to them, are like, they don't believe that what I know or the opportunity that I'm outlining is real. And she's like, I just feel like they can't look past certain things in order to accept that I may have the next big thing in medical care.
Yeah, because I mean, how do they invest in biotech if they have to know everything, or in like
That's
quantum computing?
Kit, that's exactly what I said. I said, I know they don't know how a freaking heart stent works, but when the guy who invented it says, I went to MIT, and all this stuff, and I've invented this new stent, and this is all the uses of it, and then you throw cash at them, like you can't say like, I know how internal medicine works. We're experts in internal medicine. That's what we invest in. And so that's where I feel it was like a disingenuous response by the VC. Oh, we don't know enough about this.
Yeah. Like what could be done about this? Because, as minorities, right, I'm sure there's many of us that really want to take part in changing the world and changing the system. Like what could we do better as a community?
It's not just, well, I think collectively whether you're in the majority or you're in the minority, collectively, we all have to recognize that we are biologically predisposed to prejudice. That's how we survived, right? Like, I see that thing over there, it's got some characteristics that make me nervous. I'm going to run, right? Like, it's been biologically programmed into us. But what you have to do is recognize when you're thinking that way and make sure that it is not influencing your judgment and the way you interpret content. And I'd say I have to do that, right? I have to do that when I run my company. And I have to do that, quite frankly, around age. This is where I think that there's this struggle a bit between what they say, like what do they call them? The Gen Zs, or like sort of
yeah.
Or okay. Here's the struggle. I think a lot of Gen Zs are reacting negatively because they are not seen properly within an environment. Whereas some of them are quite precocious, are quite capable, but we can't get past the fact that they're 24, so we don't listen to them. And so I've had to, my initial reaction to some of my younger employees, sometimes I know in my head, I'm like, what the, like, how do you know? You haven't been on this earth. Like,
that's right.
My career is longer than when you've been on this earth. I know, I hear that, I let it go by, and then I'm like, okay, now I can listen clearly. And so just, I would suggest that all, VCs, anybody looking at it from an investment standpoint, like, your bias is going to be there, but you have to say, negotiate with it and say, thanks for your input, right? And now I'm going to, listen with a little bit more clarity, and not just this sort of assumption questioning the person that's in front of me. And it's something you've got to work at. But I will tell you this, like, for me personally, I have found that if you really give everyone, respect, and assume, you go the other way, assume that everyone knows what they're talking about, they can execute, you will see all different types of people doing amazing things because you gave them the mental grace to demonstrate that, instead of just being so dismissive so quickly.
Yeah.
What can we do as minorities? I don't really know, like that. I don't know. And what I do see a lot of times is overcompensation from minorities in entrepreneurship, where they feel that they must immediately upon meeting someone give their entire credentials. And they're doing that because they want to almost overemphasize that, do you know who I am, right? But and I know that, like, doing that's off-putting.
Oh, super off-putting.
Right. So it's like, but at the same time, it's like what they're trying to avoid is being, someone patronizing them, or someone putting them in a box that is, like, so completely inappropriate. And one of the people who used to work at HR at Goldman is a Black woman who told a story about how she went into a meeting. She was the managing partner in this meeting, and the client, when she got there, asked her to go get them coffee.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, like, that really sticks with you when there's like a clear example when someone's not seeing you, if you are, not in the, sort of the traditional group who gets funded, like, it sticks with you, man. So that can be a big, huge mental challenge. And I would say it's really important for you to seek mentors who look like you and have your same lived experience, because only they're going to be able to understand. And so even with my friend, I'm like, listen, I can't give you the coping mechanisms and advice on how to deal with this, because I'm not a Black woman. You need to speak to another Black woman about who's been successful, how they've done it.
Yeah.
Mainly because that lived experience, the tools to navigate it can really only be given by someone who's also sharing it.
Yeah. But it sounds like you've done a great job in essence. What you're saying is, build your social circle of influence, people that can help you guide you through the journey. And it sounds like you have more than one mentor that actually helps you do this, because it's not an easy journey to go alone.
I can say, we talked about some of the negative sides of it, in terms of relationships. I've built some really great friendships. Like through a couple of my very, very early investors, right? Because there are sometimes some assumptions that hurt you. There are also some assumptions that help you.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So here was one of the assumptions that really helped me, right? I was pitching this idea to a bunch of guys who were former partners at Goldman. I never worked with them, right? They were a generation before me.
Yeah.
But they put in on what I'm doing very, very early. And I remember one of the things that they said, hey, hold on, how long were you working at Goldman? They said, 5 years. They're like, okay, we're in. And the assumption that they made, they're like, if you were able to work there 5 years, you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about, and we'll put some money into you, right? And it's been wonderful building a relationship with those guys. I would say that they have I feel like I got a chance to sort of work for them and be coached by them, even though we didn't share the same time at Goldman. And they're just wonderful. They're like I say they're like coaches that you want to play for if you've ever played sports.
That's right.
Where they give you, they've given me tremendous amount of encouragement, but also have held me accountable at different times. But we've built, from my perspective, a great friendship where now we're at the point where we just generally enjoy each other's company. So there are things that are built out of it through this process. But yeah, I mean, you certainly, I'll tell you what, when I'm speaking to someone or being introduced to them and they start to tell me that they've been an entrepreneur, they've worked in data, or they've worked in financial markets, boy, I pull my seat up because I want to soak in all the lessons that they have to teach. And being coachable while at the same time being confident that you know what you're doing is the balance that you have to have mentally, right? You've got to be smart enough to know that you don't have it all figured out.
That's right.
But have the judgment to be able to determine who really can give you some guidance and who's just either hating on you or doesn't really understand, like who's qualified, right? To give you feedback is something that you must figure out as an entrepreneur, because there are certainly tons of people out there who are not qualified and will give you tons of negative feedback. There's an abundance of that.
That's right. And if you're listening to this, I mean, Chris, I'm seeing all these notes. Like, it's been tremendously fruitful of a conversation because the insights you give is amazing. And so the opposite is, how can we help you? Part of this podcast is to really connect the community. And so from a community perspective, what is that we can do to help you?
Oh, well, okay. So I'll talk about the other business that I run, which is ViableMkts, which has really turned into an education business. We provide training, professional development training. It's really focused on finance and fintech, and our motto is to never charge the end consumer. So the student never pays, never, ever, ever. And I would say, like, honestly, send people my way that are looking for an opportunity. That would be very helpful to me, because what I found is that talent just needs an opportunity. I don't care what the person's background is. And it helps me because, Kit, I hire a bunch of people out of my education program.
Yeah.
So, but I hire a certain type of person, right? The person that I hire, they have an enthusiasm to learning. Their work ethic's very high, because what I need right now, I think we've got the right idea here on the BondCliQ side. I need to find the right people to get on this bus. And the bus is one in which, if the person really has a hunger to learn and sees what we're doing as being exciting and can build their skills, they're going to make sure that the bus gets to its destination. The other thing I would say to something that I know has been helpful to me is if I feel like I'm making a difference for others. Like this entrepreneurship, you can't help but be selfish on a lot of stuff, right? Because it's all about you. It's all about building. It's all about your decision. So it's like you tend towards the selfishness. So what really balances me out is being in service to others, like helping others without an expectation of anything in return. I think, Kit, it's because a lot of times becoming an entrepreneur, you enter into this environment in which everything is so freaking transactional.
That's right.
Where like, somebody helping you, well, what do I get? And so I actually want to go back to something that we were touching on. I didn't finish it, but it was like when I realized that some people just didn't know how to be helpful to me. I mentioned like friends being helpful is they're being understanding. Other people, because they assume like the only way I can help is to give you capital. Absolutely not. I had this conversation with one of my family members who didn't become an investor. And I was like, you didn't help me. And they're like, well, I don't know how to invest. Or I'm like, no. That's not what I needed. You know what I needed? I needed introductions. Help me with that. Do you know anybody out there that could potentially be an investor? Do you know how helpful that is? My next door neighbor is someone who knew my sister at business school, and we've become quite close. Found out what I was doing. He's like, let me introduce you to 3 people. Well, one of those 3 people put in $250,000 into the company. And the thing that was so beautiful about it and so helpful is he didn't say, well, I'll do these intros, but what am I going to get? He wasn't transactional with me.
That's right.
Okay, so this guy invested. So then when we put another slug of equity together, I was like, here are some options in my company. I know you didn't ask for this, but you helped me without any expectation in return. So there are ways that you can be helpful, right? Either be to an entrepreneur, either be understanding of their situation and give them grace, right? Or you don't have to put any money into it. See if you can help them with an intro or 2. Kit, something as little as just liking a post of theirs, commenting, doing stuff, giving of yourself. Some of this stuff is so small, but it is fuel to the entrepreneur. It's so great. Like, hey, you post something about what you're doing with a new product, and that's an entrepreneur that's a friend of yours. Like it and say, this is my boy or this is my girl. They're doing their thing out here. Check out their product. Like, I just can't tell you how invaluable those things are, because the cumulative effect is you feel the support. It does not always have to be monetary support. And so I think that the more people understand how they can be helpful, then there won't be this miscommunication where entrepreneurs maybe feel so alone. And I think maybe part of it is people assuming that the only way that they can help them is that they can stroke a check. And that's absolutely not the case.
No, you're right on. And really, as minorities, right, that's how we can help, is really be there for each other, not having expectations, because it's really about going back and giving in hand to pull the next person forward.
No, Kit, I was at a dinner about a month ago. No, 6 weeks ago. Damn. Time warps, by the way, when you're doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a group of Black entrepreneurs and Black VCs and sort of talking about how to create a better ecosystem where we're supportive of one another. And what I basically raised in this dinner, I said, I would just ask one thing from everyone here. Stop being transactional with each other. Stop it. Stop only helping if you can get something out of it.
That's right.
And if we all make a commitment to do that, this thing will organically get better for minorities in this space. But if we are hyper transactional with each other, then this doesn't work for us. And so, you see that when with your family, like hopefully, depends on your family. Hopefully your family's not transactional with you, Kit. But, right. But that's what I would just say, like to really any people that are listening to this, particularly for people that are in minority communities, people of color, women. help other women, help other people of color without the expectation of getting something back in return. And I think that from a mental health standpoint, it's such a massive positive that you can give to any of those entrepreneurs out there. And finally, I know we're at the hour. I'd just like to close, like, anybody who is taking this journey and trying to build something deserves your respect. They've pushed their chips into the middle, right? You might not think they've got a very good hand, but they deserve your respect. And so just, respect in communication and prompt response, respect in terms of like a clear yes or a no, like all of those things, like they deserve that. And just be mindful of that as you engage with entrepreneurs, because the mental health side of this is a massive challenge.
That's beautiful, Chris. Thank you so much for being on today and all the insight you share with the audience. And, for the audience, if you're still listening to this, as always, thank you for your support. This channel is for you. This channel is for the community, so we can all learn and share and connect with each other. If you do like, please share, follow. And next week, I'll be on with Ian Gilmore with Euler Digital and the advisory board chair of the AI Forum. Ian and I will talk about the role of human rights for AI. Till next week. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chris.
Been a pleasure, Kit. Thank you.
Thank you.